Beneath the moss and heat is America's deep south, once the richest land in the nation. Here, 5 states built a whole civilization on cotton, slavery, and swamp water, and then had to live with the consequences. The people left, but the land began to take everything back. Now wild horses run on an island bigger than Manhattan. No fences, no barns, no one feeding or medicating them. Alligators guard lagoons beside the sea, where the ocean and the swamp seem to be swallowing each other. In Louisiana, every mansion and sugar mill at Laurel Valley Village is gone. But 60 cypress cabins that enslaved people were forced to build are right there, still standing in straight rows. In southwest Georgia, farmers ignored erosion so badly that rain carved a brand new canyon out of their fields. It looks like a natural wonder, but didn't even exist before the 1800s, and is still growing wider every time it storms. This region shaped American music, food, and its soul. And yet, it's still the most misunderstood frontier in the United States. So when people say the South, they're usually thinking of accents and food. But this video is about the Deep South, the part of America that still hides some of the wildest swamps, strangest ruins, and harshest truths in the country. All packed into Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. Picture a swamp so huge it could swallow an entire state, twice, and still leave room for a small forest. This is the Atchafalaya Basin, the largest swamp in the country, acting like a giant sponge that absorbs floodwater and protects communities downstream. In fact, it grows about a football field of new land every day as the river drops sediment and builds fresh ground. Even when engineers tried to confine the flow with walls and structures, the river continued on its natural course. Along the way, these swamp forests draw enormous amounts of carbon from the air, outperforming some rainforests in slowing climate change. The coolest part is how this wetland catches and cleans polluted farm water before it reaches the Gulf, quietly providing a service worth billions. Speaking of water, one bird that's mastered living here better than almost any other, the Anhinga, a snake-necked swimmer perfectly adapted to life here. Beneath the surface, it hunts with precision, spearing fish rather than grasping them like most water birds. Its feathers lack waterproofing, allowing the bird to become fully soaked and sink low in the water. At the moment of attack, its neck coils into a tight S shape, then snaps forward in a lightning-fast strike. From above, only the slender neck may be visible, earning it the nickname the snake bird. After each dive, the bird climbs out and spreads its wings to the sun. Only once those heavy feathers dry can it take flight again. When nesting, Anhingas sometimes take over heron or egret nests, and if the nest is already occupied, they may push out eggs or chicks to claim the site. More often, they avoid conflict by reusing empty or abandoned nests when good nesting sites are hard to find. Sharing these waterways is a very different presence, the Roseate spoonbill, a vivid splash of pink that steals the spotlight. At first, though, it is not pink at all, hatching plain and white before its diet begins to change everything. By feeding on tiny shrimp rich in natural pigments, the bird slowly turns that signature shade of pink, the same chemical found in flamingos. When it feeds, the spoon-shaped bill sweeps side to side through murky water, feeling for fish, an insect it cannot see. The instant prey is detected, the bill snaps shut in a split second, faster than human reflexes. At times the bird even feeds with its head fully upside down, an unusual posture that proves remarkably effective. If shrimp become scarce, the colour can fade, leaving the spoonbill pale and ghost-like. Once hunted heavily for its feathers during the height of fashion, this species was pushed to the edge of extinction. Today, its survival is secured, even if the chicks announce hunger with grunts more fitting of pigs than elegant birds. Just beyond the wetlands sits a place where sugar once ruled everything, and the bones of that empire still stand in eerie silence at Laurel Valley Village. This is not a preserved museum. It feels more like a town everyone simply walked away from, with empty worker cabins lined up like abandoned dollhouses. At its peak, it was the largest sugar plantation in the south, but as the farmland wore out, production collapsed and nature slowly reclaimed the village. Vines crawl through broken windows, trees grow through rooftops, and the place once dominated by human suffering now serves as a refuge for possums and raccoons. Moving east from this crumbling sugar town, Georgia hides a canyon so fake-looking that tourists refuse to believe humans accidentally carved it with bad farming. Known as Providence Canyon State Park, the site is often called Georgia's Little Grand Canyon, despite forming with shocking speed. This terrain did not exist before cotton farming, a fact that leaves the canyon younger than some of the trees still growing along its rim. Long ago, forests were cleared and fields were ploughed straight up and down steep hills, a practice that quietly set the stage for disaster. Heavy rain then turned into fast-moving runoff, stripping away exposed soil and cutting deep gullies into the land. Over time, those gullies widened into a canyon, revealing bands of pink, orange, red, purple, and white soil stacked like layers in a cake. And the process has not stopped, as each storm carries more sediment away and slowly deepens the chasm. In places, the ground has grown so unstable that entire forests have collapsed inward, leaving full-grown trees lying sideways at the canyon floor. In this ever-changing environment, the eastern fence lizard has made itself at home, basking on bare ground before it streaks across the canyon's bright gullies. Often seen on sun-warmed rocks, males perform quick push-ups that flash bright blue belly patches, signalling rivals to keep their distance and advertising strength to nearby females. When threats become real, escape comes fast, as these lizards can sprint so hard that their front legs lift clear of the ground. In quieter moments, they rely on camouflage, flattening their bodies against bark until they nearly disappear into the tree itself. Beyond the canyon, Mississippi offers a different type of scar, tall white columns that once held up a grand mansion before flames ate everything but the bones. Known as Windsor ruins, the columns rise from open pasture, like a misplaced Greek temple, standing alone against grass and sky. The house survived the devastation of war that swept across the South, only to fall decades later to a single careless cigarette at a party. Sunlight filters between the pillars, and their long shadows stretch across the ground, lending the ruins a quiet, uneasy calm. These ruins speak of destruction, but across the state line in Alabama, Point Clear tells a gentler tale shaped by porches, moss-covered oaks, and steady bay breezes. In its centre rises the Grand Hotel, rebuilt again and again after hurricanes and fires tested its hold on the coast. Around it, wooden cottages still stand from an era before electric lights, their wide porches designed to catch cool air. Draped above these homes, Spanish moss hangs from oak branches, not a moss at all, but an air plant that survives by drawing moisture and nutrients straight from the humid sky. What's crazy is that the town sits on such soft, waterlogged ground that some wooden buildings slowly sink and tilt, as if melting into the earth. Farther north, along a Georgia barrier island, survival takes another form, shaped not by buildings, but by animals left to roam. On Cumberland Island, feral horses drift through dunes and maritime forests, their silhouettes recalling western mustangs at first glance. In reality, they descend from escapees and abandoned stock, left behind by failed farms, forgotten ranches, and wealthy owners over many generations. Over time, they stayed, transforming a protected barrier island into an accidental pasture that never closes. Less visibly, their presence reshapes the land, as grazing strips rare plants and hooves crush turtle nests, while waste slowly alters the soil. They also depend on shallow freshwater ponds shared with native wildlife, and during droughts some are drained to bare mud. Foals face harsh odds, with only about half surviving their first year, amid storms, parasites, hunger, and predators like alligators. Even so, the horses inspire fierce devotion, and many visitors fight to protect them despite repeated warnings from ecologists. Just inland from where they roam, another relic of human ambition crumbles into the sand, the skeletal remains of Dungeness, once a mansion grand enough to rival the finest homes. Built by the Carnegie family, the 59-room palace survived for generations until a late-century fire reduced it to a shell. Ivy swallows the walls and visitors speak of footsteps moving through halls with no floors. Salt air from the nearby beach accelerates the decay, aging the structure faster than time alone ever could. Following the coastline west to Gulf shores, sugar white beaches offer a different beauty, where sand squeaks underfoot and stays cool as nearby pavement shimmers. The secret lies in nearly pure quartz grains, so clean and fine they were once shipped away to make glass and hourglasses. Along the shore, royal terns patrol the waves, diving like feathered missiles into the surf. Their bright orange bills slice cleanly through water and grip slippery prey, a shape perfectly tuned for fishing. That flash of colour may even fool fish below, which mistake it for something small and harmless until it's too late. A short walk from the surf, Gulf State Park offers something totally different, with trails winding through swamps and forests instead of sand. Here, 9 ecosystems press together in a narrow strip, stacking dunes, marshes, pine woods and lakes side by side. Freshwater springs feed cool, clear lakes just steps from warm Gulf water, while nearby streams run tea-dark from tree tannins, not dirt. Pines border marshes that flood with salt during storms, an uneasy meeting where freshwater and marine plants share ground. Along the edge, dunes absorb storm surge like sponges, shielding everything behind them. Not long ago, a major storm erased much of the park and restoration followed, using oil spill funds that turned loss into recovery. Even the pier returned tougher than before, rebuilt again and again until concrete replaced wood, and nearby structures learned to withstand the weather. Above, magnificent frigate birds sometimes glide past on wings so wide they resemble dark crosses drifting across the sky. Built for air rather than water, they are astonishingly light for their size, with bodies designed to stay aloft at the slightest lift. Because their feathers lack waterproofing oil, frigate birds cannot land on the ocean, as contact with water can be fatal. Instead, they make a living in the air, chasing other seabirds and forcing them to drop or regurgitate their catch. With hooked beaks, they snatch fish at the surface without ever touching the water below. Riding rising air currents, they can remain airborne for weeks, resting while gliding high above the sea. During breeding season, males add spectacle by inflating a bright red throat pouch, a bold signal meant to draw attention from passing females. Down below, great blue herons stand motionless in the shallows, hunting with a completely different strategy. In fact, they can freeze in place for so long that fish forget they are there and swim right up to what looks like a strange blue stick. Their eyes cut through water glare and refraction, automatically calculating where the fish actually is rather than where it appears, like built-in physics goggles. When the moment comes, the neck works like a spring-loaded spear, coiled in an S shape that can shoot forward faster than you can blink. Afterward, they swallow prey whole and head first, sometimes gulping down fish so large you can watch the lump slide down their skinny necks like a sock going through a vacuum hose. It may seem strange, but they later vomit up pellets of bones and scales they cannot digest, essentially coughing up the parts they do not want. All of this is possible because long legs let them wade into water too deep for shorter birds, giving them access to fish that other hunters cannot reach. Back along Georgia's coast, Fort King George emerges from the marshes as the oldest English fort still standing in the state. It sits on a small rise above wetlands that flood twice daily with the tide, turning the area into a shifting maze of water and grass. What visitors see today is a careful reconstruction built atop the original ruins, even though the fort was temporary by design, with cypress structures that slowly rotted in the swamp heat. Heading west, Smith Lake introduces a very different kind of water, clear and cold instead of salty and warm. Fed from far below the dam, it stays cool year-round, with remarkable clarity that supports popular recreational fishing and wide-open boating opportunities. Along the steep shoreline, wild black-eyed Susans spill over the rocks, turning the banks into bright, accidental gardens. Look closer, and the dark centre reveals itself, not black at all, but a cone of tiny tube flowers packed so tightly they appear as one. Each of those small flowers produces its own seed, helping the plant spread with quiet efficiency. As a result, these plants survive where others fail, flourishing in poor soil that would defeat more delicate. In just a few seasons, a single plant can multiply into a golden carpet that blankets entire hillsides. Even under intense heat, the flowers remain open, continuing to bloom while others shut down to conserve water. Their bright petals serve a purpose beyond beauty, working as landing guides marked with ultraviolet patterns visible only to bees and butterflies. Heading south, Acadian village preserves a different kind of colour and culture, where restored homes tell stories of survival in the Bayou. What looks like a single settlement is actually a careful reconstruction, with houses moved from across the region and reassembled piece by piece. Homes were raised on stilts and capped with steep roofs, lifting families above floods while shedding heavy rain and keeping wildlife at a distance. Over time, many original homes were lost to decay or demolition, which is why this village gathers rare survivors to show what once filled the lowlands. At the mouth of Mobile Bay, Fort Morgan sits like a stone guardian, its cannons aimed toward any ship trying to slip past the coast. Its distinctive star shape is deliberate, designed so that an attack from any direction could be met by overlapping fire from multiple walls. Thick brick walls added another layer of defence, stopping cannonballs by trapping or cracking them instead of letting them break through. Inside those walls, soldiers lived in low, humid chambers known as casemates, spaces that felt more like caves than quarters and held heat day and night. Beneath it all, the fort sits on a shifting sandbar that tides and currents slowly push toward the sea. Following the coast northeast, Folly Beach marks what locals call the edge of America, where surfers ride waves and life settles into laid-back beach living. The nickname fits because this is the easternmost point you can reach by road along this stretch of coast, giving the town a clear end-of-the-line feel. Out over the water, the long pier reaches far enough that anglers at its tip can catch species usually found well beyond shore. Yet the land itself is fragile, as sand disappears quickly and hurricanes repeatedly reshape the shoreline, leaving the town to rebuild or pull back. Just offshore, the consequences of erosion are impossible to miss, with Morris Island Lighthouse now standing alone in the surf after the island around it vanished. The tower now leans slightly, a quiet sign that its foundation settled unevenly as sand was pulled away grain by grain. Efforts to restore it face constant limits, since stabilising a structure without solid ground turns every repair into a struggle against the sea. Nearby, black skimmers patrol these waters, skimming the surface with their uniquely uneven bills. The lower beak extends longer than the upper, glowing bright orange with a dark tip, while the bird's black and white body pattern reduces visibility from both sky and sea. With that design in place, they hunt by touch rather than sight, flying low as the lower beak drags the surface and snaps shut the instant it brushes a fish, even in darkness. Still, this precision offers little protection on land, where beach development steadily erases the sandy nesting grounds they depend on. Far from the coast, imagine a town that was never real, yet feels more haunted than many places where people once lived. This is the abandoned film set of Spectre, hidden in the woods. The entire town was built from scratch for the movie, much of it made from lightweight materials, including fake trees that still stand after years of rain and wind. When filming ended, the decision was made to leave the set behind rather than tear it down, quietly turning a temporary illusion into a permanent fixture on a private island. Over time, real life crept in, with goats wandering the streets and shoes still dangling above the main road, film props that have outlasted much of the town itself. Sadly, some storefronts later caught fire during cleanup, leaving the strange reality of a pretend town damaged by a very real disaster. Moving into the mountains, Amicalola Falls State Park waits with the tallest waterfall in the state, and the starting point of the Appalachian Trail, where real adventure begins. The name itself comes from Cherokee words meaning tumbling waters, a description that fits the sound and motion perfectly. Rather than a single plunge, the waterfall breaks into 7 distinct drops, forming a long staircase of water down the mountain. The first explorer to document the falls called it perhaps the greatest waterfall in the world, and the most majestic scene he had seen, either extreme enthusiasm or limited comparison. Above this body of water and throughout the forest, red-tailed hawks circle on thermals, scanning the treetops for movement below. They rise almost effortlessly by riding invisible columns of warm air, soaring without a wing beat as the ground slowly falls away beneath them. From that height, their vision takes over, sharp enough to spot a mouse shifting through grass from more than 100 feet in the air. That eyesight reaches beyond human limits, which lets them see ultraviolet light and even trace glowing rodent urine trails that reveal hidden paths of prey. When the moment comes, powerful talons clamp down with crushing force, and the hunt ends at once. Over time, pairs return to the same nest year after year, layering sticks until some grow into massive platforms weighing hundreds of pounds. Only adults carry the famous red tail, meaning young hawks spend their first year without the feature that makes the species instantly recognisable. Their piercing scream, meanwhile, has become so familiar that filmmakers use it as the voice for nearly every bird of prey on screen. In the wetlands near New Orleans, Fort Macomb sits in ruins, half swallowed by the marsh it was built to protect. Barely above sea level, high tides now flood its rooms, while corroding iron bleeds orange stains through the brick. Over time, abandonment reshaped the fort as graffiti spread across arches and corridors, and filmmakers and explorers replaced soldiers. From this crumbling stronghold, Murrell's Inlet offers a gentler contrast, with boat tours, coastal waterways, and seafood. Once a pirate hideout, the inlet later became a colonial port shipping rice, indigo, and cotton. Over time, the town grew as famous for food as for history, earning the title Seafood Capital of South Carolina. with locals claiming hush puppies were perfected here. Nearby, Huntington Beach State Park protects broad salt marshes and the lingering ruins of Atchafalaya Castle. Here, a freshwater lagoon sits just steps from the saltwater ocean, divided only by a thin strip of land. This mix draws life in abundance, and more than 300 bird species have been recorded here. Males are total show-offs, quietly inflating their red and yellow badges while singing to signal ownership and deter rivals. Even so, territorial defence remains intense as hawks, crows, and other intruders are driven away from invisible boundaries. Sharing the same marsh, painted buntings reveal blues, greens, and reds so vivid they feel almost unreal against the reeds. Sadly, many are illegally trapped and sold as cage pets in large numbers. In my opinion, locking wild birds away simply for their beauty shows how easily humans can damage even the simplest wonders of nature. Deep in the woods, Corpsewood Manor stands in ruins, its ivy-choked brick arches bearing the quiet weight of a violent past that turned the Gothic mansion into a place most people now avoid. Built by hand without power or plumbing, the retreat was eccentric from the start, complete with gargoyles and a castle-like chicken house. After tragedy, it was left exposed and looters hastened its collapse. Now trees press through windows and vines tighten their grip. Even as curiosity seekers stray onto land, locals hope will be left alone. On the coast, Grand Isle is a thin ribbon of sand, and the state's only inhabited barrier island, exposed to hurricanes and ruled by the ocean. Homes rise on tall stilts in quiet acceptance that flooding is inevitable, yet fishing families continue to rebuild rather than abandon the place. Just offshore, Fort Livingston crumbles on a shrinking islet, its brick walls sinking slowly into the Gulf. Construction began but stalled during the Civil War, leaving the fort unfinished yet briefly used as a Confederate position. A powerful hurricane later destroyed much of the structure, prompting the military to abandon it and remove its guns. Since then, erosion has stripped away hundreds of feet of shoreline, undermining the ground beneath the walls. Bricks and rubble sink at high tide and reappear at low tide after oil from a major spill reached parts of the fort. Across the coastal marshes, Nutria chew relentlessly through vegetation, eroding wetlands one bite at a time. At a glance, these giant rodents resemble an odd mix of beaver and rat, weighing about as much as a house cat and marked by bright orange teeth. That colour comes from iron-rich enamel, which hardens their teeth and keeps them sharp through constant gnawing. Originally brought from South America for fur farming, Nutria were later released when the fashion trade collapsed, allowing them to spread unchecked. Since then, their impact has grown severe, as a single animal can consume roughly a quarter of its body weight in plants each day. Worse still, they tear out entire root systems rather than just leaves, leaving coastal plants unable to recover once an area is cleared. With webbed hind feet built for swimming, they move easily through swamps and flooded wetlands, where feeding is easy and abundant. Their numbers grow quickly, as one pair can produce hundreds of offspring in a year. As a result, the state loses large stretches of coastal wetland every year, and Nutria play a major role in that decline. In a quiet corner of the rural south, the Hamburg Carsville African American Heritage District tells a different story, one of families who built strength against long odds. Founded by formerly enslaved people, the community bought land and built schools, churches, and businesses, growing into a self-sufficient town with its own institutions and economy. That independence made Hamburg a rare hub of black ownership and opportunity, but it also drew violent attacks that destroyed much of the community and left lasting scars. On Tybee Island, a historic lighthouse marks where the Savannah River meets the Atlantic, as dolphins hunt close to shore. Offshore, a lost hydrogen bomb from a Cold War training accident still lies unrecovered on the seafloor, an unsettling relic the military has officially written off. The island's name comes from a Native American word meaning salt, a fitting origin for a place defined by water on all sides. The lighthouse itself has been destroyed and rebuilt so many times by storms and war that only fragments of the original structure remain. Long before beachgoers arrived, the island served as a quarantine station where 6 sailors were isolated before reaching Savannah. Today, Tybee Beach erodes so quickly that thousands of tons of sand are pumped ashore to keep the coastline from vanishing. Behind it, American mink prowl the shoreline edges, hunting crabs and small fish with quiet intensity. Built for water, they are semi-aquatic predators with fur so dense and waterproof that cold never reaches their skin. This lets them dive for minutes at a time, pursuing prey beneath the surface. On land, they are solitary and fiercely territorial, often killing far more than they can eat. When threatened, they deploy an overpowering scent from anal glands, a chemical warning few predators ignore. Even so, wild minks are often mistaken for escaped farm animals, tying them to a fur trade that nearly erased them. Out in the waves, bottlenose dolphins hunt very differently, working together to corral fish before feeding in turn. They coordinate using echolocation, sending clicks that return precise information about shape, size, and distance. Each dolphin also develops a unique signature whistle, allowing others to call them individually. Their intelligence runs deep, with mirror recognition placing them among the few animals with clear self-awareness. Even sleep is adapted to the sea, as dolphins rest one half of the brain at a time while the other stays alert. In shallow water, some use strand feeding, driving fish onto mud banks and briefly beaching themselves to feed. Rapid skin regeneration helps them recover quickly from injuries. Even so, boat traffic and fishing gear lead to thousands of fatalities each year. Far from the coast, Grand Gulf Military Park preserves the ruins of a Confederate fort and the ghost of a town lost to war. Once a booming river port, Grand Gulf vanished when the Mississippi River shifted course and left it stranded. During one battle, Union gunboats shelled the fort for hours with overwhelming firepower, yet the defenders held. Visitors can still walk the original dirt walls and trenches dug by hand under fire. A nearby cemetery tells a quieter story, where graves were relocated repeatedly as the river threatened to claim them. Just downstream, Fort Proctor sits half-drowned in Lake Bourne, a fortress that was never finished and never saw a single soldier. Work stopped midway when it became clear the war would end before the fort was complete. Lake Bourne is a saltwater lagoon linked to the Gulf, exposing the structure to constant erosion. Over time, much of the fort slipped beneath the surface, as waves and salt wore it down. Thick brick walls now lurk underwater, sometimes struck by passing boats like a hidden shipwreck. Far away in South Carolina, Lake Hartwell tells another story of water's power, where a reservoir deliberately drowned entire communities. Beneath its surface lies the former town of Andersonville, its roads and walls preserved underwater. When levels drop, those roads briefly reappear, stranding boats on ground unseen for decades. At the lake's centre, a small cemetery island remains, kept above water by families who refuse to move their dead. Known as Ghost Island, its gravestones still stand, while nearly everything else lies buried below. Along the shifting shore, wildlife adapts, including black vultures that now forage at the water's edge. In a notable shift, some scavengers have started targeting live prey, attacking newborn calves and piglets on nearby farms. This change is driven by cooperation, as groups work together, with some birds distracting the mother while others move in. Once contact is made, the attacks turn swift and precise, aimed first at the most vulnerable parts to overwhelm prey far larger than the birds themselves. What makes this behaviour so unsettling is that vultures evolved as scavengers, not hunters, built to clean up what was already dead. As a result, farmers now lose livestock to birds once known only for roadside cleanup, signalling a rapid behavioural shift. Sadly, the pattern is spreading to other vulture groups across the region. Heading back to Mississippi, the town of Rodney shows what happens when nature steadily reclaims what it wants. For a moment, it nearly became the state capital, losing by a single vote and a very different future. Soon after, the Mississippi River shifted course, stranding the town far from the water that sustained it. Disease followed, with yellow fever claiming lives so fast that many graves were left unmarked and forgotten in the woods. Signs of war persist, including a church wall still pierced by a Civil War cannonball. Once home to thousands, Rodney now shelters only a few residents among crumbling buildings and overgrown streets. Congaree National Park, on the other hand, offers a quiet counterpoint where towering forests flourish with little human interference. Several times each year, floodwaters spread through the lowland forest, briefly turning trails into winding channels between tree trunks. Above the water, the canopy ranks among the tallest on Earth, reaching extraordinary heights. The park protects more champion trees than anywhere else in the region, including a loblolly pine that reaches the height of a 17-story structure. Among them stand trees more than 5 centuries old, already growing before Europeans first crossed the Atlantic and still rooted in the same flooded wetlands. Just as this forest survives by flooding and adaptation, the small town of Apalachee endured briefly before cotton pests and lost railroads erased it. Before that, the settlement was called Dogsboro, a name of unknown origin, and later became Apalachee, ironically borrowing the name of a Native American tribe that never lived there. What followed sounds unlikely, yet a bug smaller than a pencil eraser unravelled the town's economy by devouring cotton faster than fields could recover. In time, the town vanished from maps, as trees broke through roofs and vines climbed walls, reshaping old storefronts. Nearby Stone Mountain rises over the countryside, a massive granite dome whose carvings provoke more debate than awe. Cut directly into its face is a sculpture larger than Mount Rushmore and slower to complete, depicting 3 Confederate leaders on horseback, like a stone billboard for a lost cause. Less known but darker still, the mountain saw the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist group, long before it became a tourist site. Even so, the granite dome acts like bare skin, so smooth and steep that rain cannot soak in, instead racing downhill in sheets to form brief waterfalls. As the rock heats faster than the surrounding forest, it creates rising air currents, subtle updrafts that birds ride like an elevator to gain height without a single wing beat. Speaking of birds, tufted titmice dart through oak and pine woods below, their peter-peter, calls echoing as they move in noisy flocks with chickadees. Despite their size, they have been filmed plucking fur from live animals like squirrels, raccoons, and even dogs to line their nests. Stranger still, they yank hair from sleeping or distracted mammals, sometimes pulling hard enough to make the animal yelp and jump. That boldness pairs with sharp memory, as titmice hoard seeds in hundreds of spots and recall many of them weeks later. Yet duties split unevenly, with males skipping incubation and instead delivering food non-stop to nesting females for weeks. While these birds rely on temporary tree hollows, Cathedral Cavern stands as a permanent shelter carved by water over countless centuries. Its entrance is so vast, a bus could pass through with room to spare, placing it among the widest natural cave openings on Earth. Inside, it stays the same temperature year-round, untouched by heat or cold outside. Farther in, a stalagmite called Goliath towers, 4 stories tall and weighs more than 2 bulldozers, built drop by drop. Back in daylight, barn owls sweep over open fields, heart-shaped faces tuned for prey, while the cave below keeps growing in darkness. Even so, they hunt in total blackness, their facial discs acting like satellite dishes that funnel sound with razor precision. More surprising still, one ear sits slightly higher than the other, allowing the owl to locate a mouse by sound, alone, even under grass. At the same time, fringed wing edges soften airflow, letting the bird approach quieter than a whisper. Together, these advantages make it astonishing that barn owls catch mice with zero visibility, pulling off aerial feats many birds fail at in full light. They swallow prey whole, later coughing up compact pellets of bone and fur they cannot digest. That efficiency counts, since a single family can remove thousands of rodents each year, reducing reliance on traps and poisons on farmland. Sadly, as old barns vanish, owl numbers drop too, leaving these specialists short on nesting sites. Their harsh screeches, closer to a horror soundtrack than birdsong, once fueled myths that cast them as omens of death. From these night hunters, old Sheldon church ruins loom roofless, their brick columns framing nothing but open sky. Before reaching this state, it burned twice in separate wars, first by British forces and later during Sherman's march. After the second fire, freed slaves dismantled what remained, reusing the bricks for their own homes. Even so, weddings are still held here, with couples standing beneath open sky where a roof once stood. Over time, the site drew ghost hunters who claimed to see a grieving woman in old-fashioned dress near a child's grave. Unlike these ruins left to weather in place, Lake Charles refuses to stay down, recovering after hurricane devastation. In under a year, 2 major hurricanes struck 6 weeks apart, followed by a severe freeze that burst pipes and record floods that swamped debris-filled streets. Even now, some schools operate from trailers, a downtown tower awaits demolition, and traffic still crosses the ageing Calcasieu River Bridge. Built for 50 years and lighter traffic, it is now over 70 years old and carries more than twice its intended load. That wear shows in an extremely low sufficiency rating, placing it among the nation's most dangerous bridges awaiting replacement. After decades of debate, replacement finally began, though the new bridge is still years from opening. While this bridge struggles with modern decay, Sunbury embraces its colonial past, preserving streets and stories from before the nation was born. For a brief moment, it nearly became the state capital, competing directly with Savannah before its rise abruptly stalled. What followed was relentless, as British raids, yellow fever, and repeated hurricanes struck in succession, wiping the town from the map. Nearby, the fall of Fort Morris sealed that fate, after defenders answered a surrender demand with, "Come and take it," only to see the fort burned. Moving toward the mountains, Little River Falls plunges over a cliff at the entrance to Little River Canyon, where water has carved one of the deepest gorges in the region. Unusually, it flows across the top of a mountain until reaching the falls, where the water finally drops and cuts into the rock below. Above the roar, cedar waxwings gather in nearby trees, their sleek crests and yellow-tipped tails flashing as they feed in the mist. They often pass berries beak to beak, like a game of hot potato, a curious exchange scientists suspect plays a role in courtship. Oddly enough, fermented fruit can leave these birds intoxicated, sending them wobbling through the air, tumbling from branches, or colliding with windows. In extreme cases, overeating boozy berries can prove fatal, turning an abundant food source into a dangerous gamble. The behaviour became so widespread that wildlife officials once reassured residents not to panic over staggering birds during berry season. Much of this chaos comes from scale, as large nomadic flocks can strip entire trees bare in a matter of hours. They manage it by gulping fruit whole, swallowing several berries in rapid succession without pausing. As a result, migrations stretch on for months, repeatedly interrupted by feeding stops wherever ripe fruit appears. Young birds sometimes pay the price, mistaking toxic berries for safe ones, before experience teaches the difference. Past these berry bandits, Fort Pike rests along the shoreline, a brick fortress built to guard waters that never saw the battle it was meant to fight. Built to stop invasions that never came, its cannons never fired in combat, and the fort instead endured hurricanes, flooding and service as a Civil War prison. Sadly, this fortress sinks forgotten into the swamp. Yet in the foothills nearby, Greenville grew into a growing mountain town that never needed to defend itself. Not long ago, it was a textile city so polluted that a highway was built over its main river to hide the damage. Decades later, the road was removed, the river uncovered, and the industrial corridor reborn as a public park. The change was dramatic, lifting Greenville from a fading mill town to one of the nation's fastest growing cities. Downtown, Liberty Bridge seems to float above the river, its curved span hanging without supports below. Even so, former textile mills now stand empty or reborn as apartments. Just steps away, Reedy River Falls spills through the city centre, a rare place where nature and urban life now meet. For decades, the falls were hidden beneath a textile mill, while dyes polluted the river so badly its colour shifted with the workday. Eventually, the mill was torn down and tons of concrete removed, revealing a waterfall once buried under a parking lot and transforming it into the city's most photographed spot. Elsewhere in Georgia, Ebenezer tells a different story of renewal, where religious refugees built a community from scratch in the wilderness, seeking freedoms they could not find elsewhere. Founded by Salzburgers expelled from Austria for their Protestant faith, Ebenezer began as a desperate settlement in disease-ridden swampland. Within a few years, the entire town relocated upstream to escape deadly conditions. Despite the hardship, the community took bold stands, opposing slavery decades before the Revolution, while running one of America's earliest orphanages and offering free schooling. After the Revolutionary War, Ebenezer slowly faded, leaving behind little more than a historic church and cemetery. Moving toward the coast, Jekyll Island Historic District preserves a stark legacy, where the nation's wealthiest families once built exclusive winter retreats. At its centre stood the Jekyll Island Club, whose members controlled roughly 1/6 of the world's wealth. Entry was rare even for the rich, requiring unanimous approval that no fortune alone could buy. For decades, the club operated as a whites-only enclave, hosting parties as the Great Depression raged beyond its gates. When World War II began, many families simply left, abandoning mansions like seasonal homes. Today, those same buildings host weddings and guests, letting ordinary visitors rent rooms once used by the Rockefeller family and Vanderbilt family. And now the beaches host a different elite, a sea turtle's nest where millionaires once strolled. Each summer, loggerhead sea turtles return to the very beaches where they were born, crossing thousands of miles with a homing sense that brings them back decades later. Along the way, females shed real tears while laying eggs, a salt-flushing process that looks mournful but keeps their bodies in balance. Once the eggs hatch, the struggle intensifies as tiny hatchlings burst from the sand at night and race toward the brightest horizon. Too often, artificial lights pull them inland instead of toward the sea, leaving many to perish before they ever reach the water. Even for those that do, survival is slim, with only a fraction reaching adulthood after running a gauntlet of predators. Yet those that survive grow into remarkable divers, capable of resting underwater for hours without surfacing for air. Rarer still, green sea turtles also nest here, the only adult sea turtles that live on plants, grazing seagrass like underwater cattle. Despite migrating great distances between feeding grounds and nesting beaches, they too return to the same narrow strip of sand where life began. Waiting at the waterline, ghost crabs patrol the sand, ambushing hatchlings as they scramble toward the surf and dragging them underground. Built for speed, these crabs can sprint sideways faster than most people can run, placing them among the quickest animals on the beach. Stranger still, they breathe air through modified gills that act like lungs, though they must keep them damp with seawater to survive. Adding to their advantage, ghost crabs have eyes on stalks with nearly full vision, which lets them spot danger or prey without turning their bodies. Yet even these specialists are vulnerable, as artificial lights and coastal development erase dunes and disrupt the dark beaches they depend on. Far from these scavengers, Chattahoochee National Forest spreads across mountain ridges, where streams race downhill through thick woods instead of flowing onto sand. Though it appears untouched, the forest was clear-cut in the early 1900s and regrew almost entirely from scratch. Much of what seems old is actually young, with trees younger than many nearby houses. In part, it was created to stop floods and erosion caused by logging, redirecting damage toward replanting. Even so, it's hard to imagine railroads once cut through every valley, now softened until hikers barely sensed they existed. One absence remains, as American chestnut trees lost to disease still have no true replacement. Darting between regrown trees, eastern chipmunks stuff their cheek pouches with acorns and vanish into burrows, treating the forest floor like a grocery store. Those cheeks can stretch to nearly 3 times the size of their heads, expanding outward as food piles in. In fact, they hoard so aggressively that a single burrow can hold thousands of nuts and seeds, stockpiled for months ahead. Beneath the ground, their tunnels can run more than 30 feet long, divided into rooms for sleeping, storage, and waste. Even during hibernation, chipmunks wake every few days to snack from these caches, then slip back into sleep, as if hitting snooze. Despite their cute looks, they are fiercely territorial and may fight each other to the death over space and supplies. As tiny hoarders guard their underground kingdoms, Auraria sits abandoned, a ghost town of empty buildings and broken gold dreams. For a brief moment, this town ignited the first major gold rush in America, years before California, drawing thousands almost overnight. Just as quickly, the boom collapsed, with the town swelling from wilderness to frenzy and back to near silence once the easy gold vanished. All that's left are scattered buildings and collapsing mine shafts, faint traces of a town that once held hotels, shops, and its own mint. While mountain streams once fueled that gold rush, Lake Pontchartrain dominates the coast, one of the largest saltwater bodies in the country, despite its misleading name. In truth, it's an estuary where Gulf saltwater blends with fresh water from inland rivers. Even more surprising, bull sharks over 6 feet long enter this shallow basin each summer to raise their young, yet no shark attack has ever been recorded here. Much of the water stays surprisingly shallow, letting people wade far from shore. Still, after heavy rains, pollution and runoff can cloud the water, prompting officials to warn against swimming. The Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, one of the world's longest bridges over water, runs so far across the estuary that both shorelines vanish, creating the uncanny feeling of driving at sea. Two parallel bridges sit side by side, with the second added decades later as traffic outgrew the original. Just beyond the northern shore lies Eden Isles, a canal-lined community that feels like a small American Venice. Built in the mid-20th century, it was carved from marshland by dredging canals into a tight grid. As a result, nearly every home opens onto water, complete with a dock where neighbours travel by boat instead of by street. The houses rest on fill pulled from the canals themselves, literally sitting on dredged mud. That choice proved risky, as Hurricane Katrina flooded the area so deeply that boats ended up inside living rooms, yet residents rebuilt in place. Even now, the canals suffer from poor water quality, trapping pollution, algae, and runoff. While Eden Isles built its identity around water, Montgomery became known for something very different, a capital where the fight for civil rights reshaped the nation. It sounds unbelievable, but Montgomery was the Confederacy's first capital, where leaders wrote laws to preserve slavery inside buildings that still stand today. Long before that, Montgomery's economy ran on cotton and the enslaved labour that worked fields stretching for miles. After the Civil War, cotton rebounded through sharecropping that trapped freed black farmers in debt, with upland varieties shaping a brutal regional economy for generations. Earlier still, the cotton gin sped processing, but perversely deepened slavery, as planters expanded fields and bought more enslaved labour. Upland plants grow fluffy white bolls that seem harmless, yet hand harvesting tore skin on sharp seed pods hidden like natural barbed wire. Under constant threat of violence, enslaved workers were forced to collect hundreds of pounds daily, bent in searing heat for 12 relentless hours. The crop stripped nutrients so fiercely that soil collapsed within years, driving planters to clear new ground and abandon exhausted fields. Even today, seeds come coated in toxins, as relentless pests leave the plant unable to survive without repeated chemical baths. Still, the crop dominates the region, now gathered by giant machines, while herbicides wipe out everything else, leaving monoculture deserts behind. During harvest, so much lint fills the air that it drifts like snow, settling over roads and cars in pale layers. Following the river that once carried cotton bales, Natchez rises on Mississippi bluffs, enriched by the trade and among the oldest cities on these waters. Before the Civil War, it claimed more millionaires per capita than anywhere in the nation, as plantation elites lived in luxury funded by enslaved labour. At the same time, the city hosted one of the South's largest slave markets, Forks of the Road, where thousands were sold like livestock. Its name comes from the Natchez people, who lived here first, though European settlement and disease nearly erased the tribe, leaving little beyond that legacy. An unlikely turn followed when the town surrendered to Union forces without a shot, sparing its streets as other southern cities burned. Because of that choice, many mansions still stand, even as the fragile bluffs beneath them slowly crumble into the river. Today, these historic homes act as architectural showpieces and uneasy reminders of wealth built on human suffering, open to visitors who walk rooms once worked by the enslaved. In fact, Natchez holds the nation's largest collection of antebellum mansions, with more than 100 preserved homes spared when the city surrendered without a fight. As a result, many estates remain intact, some so large they hide staircases, secret rooms, and servant passages designed to keep enslaved workers out of sight. Among these estates, Roseate Mansion rises above the river, a Greek Revival landmark that later became Union Army headquarters during the war it once sought to avoid. Built with enslaved labour for a cotton planter, it was later claimed by Union generals fighting slavery itself. Its owners watched in silence as enemy officers ate at their table and slept in their beds. In a bitter twist, the mansion survived intact because Union troops protected it for their own use, while similar homes elsewhere were burned. Just blocks away, Stanton Hall fills an entire city block, its scale pushing Greek Revival excess to the extreme. Four massive Corinthian columns anchor the entrance, each so thick it would take few people holding hands to wrap around, supporting a portico that looks more courthouse than home. Inside, that ambition continues, with an entrance hall stretching 72 feet, beneath ceilings so high, visitors feel like ants in a giant's house. While it embodies excess fully realised, Longwood remains frozen in time, the nation's largest octagonal house, and an unfinished Moorish revival dream halted by the Civil War. Topped by an onion-shaped dome, it looks like a Russian palace misplaced in Mississippi, its 6 floors arranged in a baffling octagon. Before the war, the owner spent lavishly on imported materials and skilled craftsmen, chasing one of the South's grandest homes. Then the economy collapsed, and construction stopped almost overnight. Workers fled, leaving tools and half-built walls exactly where they fell. The family retreated to the finished basement and lived there for generations, beneath floors that never rose beyond debris. Upriver, Cahaba takes abandonment further, an entire former capital slowly dissolving back into the forest. Streets that once held offices and homes now survive only as faint lines of grass and trees, where you would never guess a city stood. In the end, rain and mud accomplished what armies could not, driving people away until the town quietly vanished from the map. As the woods closed in, wells, brick foundations, lonely doorsteps, and a burial ground for formerly enslaved people remained, marking lives never fully free. Strangely, some visitors arrive for ghost stories and night walks rather than history, treating the ruins like a horror set instead of a place where real families lived and lost everything. Moving east to the coast, Sullivan's Island tells a darker arrival story, where the ocean carried people who never chose to come. For generations, this small island served as a primary gateway into bondage, one of the most important entry points in the American slave trade. After the crossing, many survivors were confined in quarantine buildings known as pest houses, held for weeks before sale under the guise of disease control. In effect, these structures treated human beings as contaminated cargo, inspected and isolated much like imported goods. Because of that history, countless Black Americans today trace ancestral footsteps to this shoreline, where freedom was still impossibly distant. Just down the shore, Fort Moultrie rises from the same sand, its walls built to guard the harbour that once received those ships. Later, the site took a darker turn, serving as a prison where the Seminole leader Osceola was deceived into surrender and died far from home. And then there's the strange footnote. Edgar Allan Poe once served here, later transforming these same shores into stories of mystery and unease. Up on Lookout Mountain, Rock City offers a very different spectacle, where people claim you can see 7 states from a single spot. Oddly, Though named for rock formations once likened to a city of stone, its fame came instead from barn roofs painted with Sea Rock City, scattered across the countryside like early pop-up ads. Down from the cliffs and back in the woods, carpenter ants remind us that conquest needs no views or slogans, just patience, strong jaws, and time. Unlike termites, they do not eat timber, but carve it, hollowing tunnels and chambers while spilling fine sawdust like crews that never sweep up. In fact, a single colony may spread across several trees or logs, linked by invisible scent trails that function as private highways. When a lone scout finds food, it lays a chemical path home, and soon thousands follow in disciplined lines. More impressively, each worker can haul more than 50 times its own weight, a feat that would be like a person lifting a car with ease. Rather than villains, these insects usually move into wood, already softened by rot or moisture, acting more as recyclers than wreckers. They even sense danger through vibrations in their legs, detecting approaching footsteps before we notice them scatter. At the centre, a queen may live over a decade, steadily producing eggs and expanding a hidden empire through ageing timber. Heading south into wetter ground, the Okefenokee swamp shows what happens when water takes over, a flooded forest where cypress rise from dark channels and life persists. Its name means trembling earth, a warning that what appears solid is often floating peat and moss that quiver underfoot like a soaked sponge. In fact, some of that ground is nothing more than thick mats of vegetation strong enough to hold your weight, yet rippling outward with every step. The water itself looks black and ominous, though it is surprisingly clear, stained dark by centuries of decaying plants that steep the swamp like an enormous cup of tea. Over time, that slow decay makes the water highly acidic, discouraging certain fish while favouring cypress and even carnivorous plants adapted to the chemistry. Even so, despite its protected status, proposals for nearby mining threaten to lower the water table and dry out this delicate system. Moving through tea-coloured channels, American alligators glide between lily pads, eyes and nostrils barely visible, built for ambush in water dark enough to hide them until the final second. They can remain submerged for over an hour, motionless as driftwood, waiting for prey to wander within range. When the moment comes, that stillness explodes as powerful tails drive them straight out of the water to snatch birds and small animals from low branches. Their bite ranks among the strongest in the animal kingdom, capable of crushing turtle shells, yet those same jaws carry hatchlings with surprising care. Rather than chew, they clamp down, spin, and swallow large chunks whole, sometimes wedging a carcass underwater until it softens enough to tear apart. During rare cold snaps, some even endure ice, holding their snouts above the surface, while their bodies slow in frigid water. Sadly, relentless hunting for leather nearly wiped them out, though legal protection allowed populations to rebound across southern wetlands. Even before birth, hatchlings chirp from inside their eggs, signalling their mother to dig them free and gently assist the slowest to emerge. While they command the waterways with patient precision, sandhill cranes claim the skies and prairies above, their rattling bugle calls carrying across open marshes. In fact, their lineage stretches far into prehistory, placing them among the oldest surviving bird species still walking the earth. Their voices match that long lineage, loud and carrying for miles, a sound somewhere between a trumpet blast and a rattling hiss. During breeding season, pairs reinforce lifelong bonds through elaborate dances, leaping, bowing and tossing sticks in displays that look almost celebratory. To prepare for nesting, they even stain their grey feathers with iron-rich mud, which gives them a rusty brown camouflage before they molt back again. Within hours of hatching, downy chicks can walk and swim, trailing their parents across wetlands as they learn to hunt insects and small prey. Each year, large flocks rise into the sky in sweeping V formations, riding warm air currents across thousands of miles with practiced efficiency. Sadly, relentless hunting pushed some populations close to collapse, and shrinking wetlands still test their resilience. From these bugling marshes, head north to the mountains, where Helen, Georgia swaps cypress and crane, calls for faux Bavarian facades and postcard shops in the Appalachians. It began as a fading logging town, before business owners rebranded it with alpine trim to draw tourists. The shift came fast, with Bavarian sketches turned into decorative beams nailed onto plain brick storefronts. Unexpectedly, the gamble worked, turning a quiet mountain stop into one of the state's busiest destinations. Extended Oktoberfest celebrations now fill the streets with bratwurst, beer, and a mix of lederhosen and southern accents. Beneath the theme lies little true German tradition, just a creative marketing fix that saved local shops. Leaving the faux chalets behind, Birmingham, Alabama rises to the west, shaped by steel mills and civil rights struggles rather than tourist design. During the industrial boom it grew so quickly, it earned the nickname Magic City, fueled by rare proximity to iron ore, coal and limestone. Everything needed to forge steel in one place. Decades later, the same streets became flashpoints of the civil rights movement, where protests and police violence forced the nation to confront injustice. The era grew so volatile that repeated attacks on black churches and homes earned the city the grim nickname Bommingham. Overlooking it all stands the Vulcan statue, the world's largest cast iron statue, a towering god of fire holding his torch above the skyline, symbolising the furnaces that built and scarred the city. Originally crafted for a World's Fair to showcase industrial pride, he was later left standing in a fairground for decades, a colossal figure without a clear purpose. Now the torch shifts colour, green for days without traffic deaths, red when tragedy strikes, quietly transforming it into a glowing civic signal. South of towering Iron God, Repton offers a quieter legacy, where perseverance and education shaped lives in ways no monument ever could. It began as a railroad boomtown, rising almost overnight as stores, banks, a hotel, and even a hospital clustered along the tracks. Timber fueled that surge, with workers cutting longleaf pines and sending massive logs downriver to mills along the Gulf. Yet the boom proved brief. Within decades, as passenger trains faded and trucks took over freight, the population shrank and storefronts fell silent. Collapsed facades and weathered buildings now mark where a busy community once stood, reminders of how quickly opportunity can move on. West toward the coast, New Orleans rises in loud celebration, a place where opera rang out early in American history, proving culture can flourish, even amid swamps and storms. Productions began here before many cities built theatres, as French and Italian works filled grand halls, while much of the nation still sang in wooden churches. For a time, it had more opera houses per capita than anywhere else, drawing jewelled crowds to European performances in a humid frontier port. Beyond music, the city birthed craps, a dice game refined by a Creole gambler from London and renamed from a mocking French nickname. Yet despite its flair, it was among the last major cities to install modern sewage, leaving residents to endure floods and filth long after others modernised. Its street culture also resists convention, allowing open drinks in plastic go-cups long after most of the country outlawed them. Step into the French Quarter, where music spills from balconies and doorways, turning the neighbourhood into a living stage. Despite the name, much of what visitors see was built by the Spanish after fires destroyed the original buildings, leaving wrought iron balconies and courtyards that look French but are not. Beneath the charm lies fragility, as the district sits below sea level and survives only through constant pumping that keeps water at bay. Over centuries, discarded refuse and waste raised the ground itself, burying original floors and quietly reshaping the streetscape. In time, the area became the nation's first regulated red light district, where jazz took root in bars and brothels under the glow of gas lamps. Even the famed iron balconies served practical ends, bracing buildings against floods and offering escape routes during fires. Heading east along the Gulf Coast, Fort Gaines stands guard on Dauphin Island, a stronghold that once faced battle in the bay beyond its guns. Its cannons commanded the narrow channel, forcing wooden warships to pass directly beneath their aim. Confederates seeded those waters with crude torpedoes, early mines hidden just below the surface. When a Union ship struck one, it sank within minutes, proving the threat was lethal. Amid the smoke, Admiral Farragut allegedly urged his fleet forward with his famous line about torpedoes, though the exact words remain debated. Despite the drama, the fort surrendered after only a few days, once Union forces proved overwhelming. Even so, it is often overshadowed by neighbouring defences across the bay, though both shaped the fight. Now brown pelicans skim and dive in those same waters where warships once pushed through mines and cannon fire. From heights taller than a 3-storey building, they plunge at speeds that would stun a human, yet air sacs beneath their skin cushion the impact like built-in shock absorbers. Just before contact, each bird twists its neck and body, turning what looks like a crash into a controlled strike. The expandable throat pouch then balloons outward, holding far more than the stomach itself, before draining away the water. Not long ago, however, these skilled hunters nearly vanished when a powerful pesticide thinned their eggshells so severely that nests failed across the coast. By the time the cause was understood, entire shorelines had fallen silent, and recovery required decades of bans and careful protection. Gradually, the species rebounded, returning in sweeping flocks that now glide once more above the Gulf. From these diving silhouettes, Beaufort waits along the Carolina coast, where moss-draped oaks and quiet streets have played backdrop to history and film alike. The town appears so often on screen that locals joke they've starred in everything from Forrest Gump to The Big Chill without leaving their porches. Visitors can stroll streets lined with over 50 pre-Civil War mansions on broad lots with wide porches, alongside historic churches and museums facing river breezes. Further north, Huntsville, Alabama, known as the Rocket City, leaped from cotton fields to rocket science in a single generation. Almost overnight, this farm town became an aerospace hub when the US moved German rocket engineers here after World War II to build missiles and rockets to the moon. Unbelievably, a former wartime rocket engineer later settled in Huntsville and helped design the massive rockets that powered America's early space missions. Gradually, cotton warehouses gave way to labs, and crop fields bordered test stands where engines thundered loud enough to shake windows miles away. The city even displays a full-scale Saturn V you can walk beneath, its immense frame stretched on its side like a stranded metal whale. At the centre stands the US Space and Rocket Center, where visitors touch moon rocks and enter shuttle simulators, while propulsion systems still undergo trials nearby. Outside, a full-size space shuttle mock-up rises skyward, visible from the highway, as if poised for liftoff. Nearby lies one of only 3 surviving Saturn V rockets, longer than a football field, once powerful enough to shake the ground, now resting like a sleeping giant. Here, children attend space camp, climbing into multi-axis trainers that spin them upside down until all sense of direction disappears. Most astonishing of all, guests can touch a real moon rock brought back by Apollo astronauts, a fragment of another world within arm's reach. From vertical climbs into orbit, we drop to vertical descents into Earth, Ellison's Cave, where cavers rappel nearly 600 feet into darkness. Its signature shaft, Fantastic Pit, plunges so deep a drop stone takes seconds to hit bottom, which makes it one of the nation's longest freefall cave drops. The craziest part is this. At the rim, headlamps cannot reach the floor, their beams swallowed by a void that seems to consume light. Deeper within, Incredible Pit drops almost as far, forcing climbers to descend one huge shaft, trek through tunnels, and face another plunge. The system demands respect, as gear failures and inexperience have claimed lives hundreds of feet below ground. Climbing back up, we surface near Lake Kiowa, a man-made reservoir where water is controlled for recreation and power. This wide expanse formed when an entire valley was flooded, submerging the Cherokee town of Kiowa, colonial forts, and centuries-old burial grounds. Before the waters rose, archaeologists raced to recover pottery, beads, and human remains, knowing the rest would disappear beneath the surface. Most unsettling of all, people now wakeboard and fish above those drowned sites, unaware that villages and battlefields lie below. The lake also cools a nearby nuclear plant, pulling cold water through massive pipes and returning it warmer, effectively serving as a giant radiator. Floating on the surface, double-crested cormorants dive into the engineered waters, hunting for fish. Unlike most waterbirds, their feathers absorb water, which makes them less likely to float and lets them dive without bubbles pushing them back up. They power forward with webbed feet, wings tight to the body, weaving through submerged channels with precision. Most astonishing of all, they can plunge more than 100 feet, chasing prey in dim light and relying on underwater hearing nearly as sharp as a seal's. After each hunt, however, they perch with wings spread to dry, holding a pose that seems almost sculpted. Their appetite has earned hostility, and in some regions fisheries once culled thousands, branding them as raiders of nets and lines. Drifting south, we reach Des Allemands, a small town known as the catfish capital of the world. In truth, its livelihood depends on whiskered bottom feeders. Without catfish, much of the economy would collapse. Most remarkable of all, veteran fishermen identify species by touch alone, feeling whiskers in water too murky to see a hand. In the same shallows, Great egrets stalk on thin legs, snapping so fast they make human efforts look clumsy. They stand motionless for minutes, then the neck uncoils and a fish disappears in a single thrust. Most astonishing of all, the strike moves so quickly, high-speed cameras barely capture it, faster than a blink. Yet this grace once drew hunters who wiped out nesting colonies for the plume trade. At the height of the craze, feathers sold for more than twice their weight in gold, making the birds worth more dead than alive. The slaughter grew so severe that conservationists formed the National Audubon Society to end the trade and secure legal protection. From the brink of extinction to nearly every Louisiana bayou, great egrets complete the Deep South's arc, a region where ruin and renewal move in cycles as old as the swamps. This is the Deep South, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of Baja California, check out this video.